Hello, I'm Somi Arian. I'm the founder of FemPeak, a platform where visionary women come to gain live access to global leaders, learn about the macroeconomic landscape, and stay ahead of the curve. My guest on today's podcast is Matt Tuck, Head of Product, Service, and Operations at NatWest. Matt and I were recently on a panel together at the Financial Alliance for Women, and I couldn't help but notice his passion for closing the diversity and inclusion gap. During our interview, we also talked about blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies, and whether or how they might work in the existing financial system in the future. We met because we were both on the same panel at a diversity-related event, right? And I heard a passion in your voice, for this cause. It seemed like you really cared about it. There were other people on that call as well who seemed to really care about it. And this has happened to me on a number of occasions where I have met directors, and C-level executives like yourselves being at these events, and you hear that passion. And then when we go in and talk to their team, and most of the time when we look at, okay, how can we help you? We have a great audience right now. We have got over 60,000 women in our mailing list. We've got 16,000 on the platform, and we have just started. I'm going to give you some revelations of some of the things that we've just recently learned about what women's interest is and where their interest lies, and why I believe that traditional finance companies and banks are missing out on that audience. And the way I see it is that they are not, companies like NatWest, like, HSBC, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, all these companies that are trying to attract women, they have a challenge on their hand, because on the one hand, the nature of finance in general is changing. And on the other hand, for many, many years, women have not been attracted to it. So finance is changing, women are not attracted to it. So it's a really difficult battle. And I see FemPeak as a place where, that we could be your ally and we could really help, and change that. But when I see that big corporations, big banks, when I see that when they look at FemPeak, they put us into their diversity box, and they're like, okay, so what are they going to do? They're going to run some events, and we can tick our diversity box. Oh, we have done some other events for women, and it's like there's no meaningful movement happening that is going to really like move the needle, So from where you stand, tell me a little bit about, first of all, what's your sense of where do you see your industry, which by that I mean traditional finance industry, like traditional banking, where do you see that standing in this world of, where there is so much interest in DeFi and all these new ways of doing finance and crypto, all of the new things that are happening, right? So where do you see you stand? And once I hear your opinion on that, and then we can talk about women and like how women, where women stand, what's happening. And then I can tell you some revelations that we have found on FemPeak that has been very interesting.
I'd love to hear those. I mean, as a start point in terms of attracting talent, female talent into the finance sector, I think that's had quite a lot of focus over the last sort of 5 years. And when we look at our intake at the more junior levels, both graduate and sort of school leavers, we see a really good balance actually in gender of the cohorts that are coming in. And I think that's as a result of quite a lot of work over recent years to find much more balance, not just in terms of gender diversity, but also in terms of ethnicity as well, of colleagues. And we do that on sort of looking at our customer base, which is radically changing as well, right? We're seeing far more women starting businesses, being entrepreneurial, and we need to be reflective of our customer base in our own organization, and of all the other reasons we know why a good balance of diversity across the organization adds value. There's lots of data points that show the value you get from a more diverse organization. I think the bigger challenge continues to be in the progression of those individuals through the organization, and how do we make sure that we have a much more balanced senior organization. If I speak specifically to NatWest, we have a real advantage in that our CEO is female. Alison obviously has led the Rose Review, which is obviously an industry focus, but that does obviously translate quite directly internally within NatWest. So from the top of the house, we're seeing significant change around the leadership table, much more gender diversity around Alison's senior leadership table since she took over. And at the bottom of the organisation, we're seeing our intakes continue to be much more balanced in terms of gender and ethnicity. So that's the middle, if you like, the middle is the area where we need to continue to focus. And that's a much broader topic around how do you create the right successful environment for our female bankers to continue to grow. And we're seeing significant improvement, but there's still a long way to go. So that's sort of how I would describe where we are on our journey in NatWest. I will say that the organisation is spending significantly more time and energy and effort around this topic, and has been for a while. But as I say, with Alison now in the CEO's seat, it's a fantastic opportunity, I think, for her to lead more, not just from a NatWest perspective, but also lead the line from an banking industry perspective through the activities that her name is against and in the Rose Review.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Because, for example, at FemPeak, our focus is specifically in that middle section. It's about women, who come in, who are in mid management or, early stage startup and want to get to the top tiers. And that's exactly our focus. And that's why I thought that we would be a good partner. But it seems like, that you already have similar things, or I still, obviously I don't know exactly what other areas you're working on, so it's hard for me to say whether they're similar, but we are finding that we do have a unique edge. So the revelation that we have found is that women coming to our platform are extremely interested in Web3, DeFi, crypto, NFTs, metaverse, and all these new areas. So on 16th of November, so when we first started the platform, we were not talking about these areas. However, I personally have been studying the blockchain space since 2018, and I've been extremely interested in it. I actively bought and traded, and I know very well. I have a very, very good knowledge of that space, but we were not talking about it on the platform because I was under the impression that women aren't interested in it. And we were completely shocked. On 16th of November, we had a session which was called Crypto, NFTs, the Metaverse, What's Beyond the Hype. And that became our most successful event in the sense of the number of people who upgraded to educate themselves about it and wanted to learn about it. So since then, we have done more and more on those topics, and women are extremely interested in it. I think my assessment is that traditional finance is going to lose women, if they don't make a big effort to attract them, both as customers and as in terms of employees. Because like, for example, today we have a session on the platform which is called Opportunities for Women in Blockchain, and we're going to talk about the kind of career path. We would not have gone down that route if we had a lot of traditional finance companies back us up. But what we found was that the traditional finance companies have been very, very slow. Like, I'm running a startup, we work at incredible speed. So the traditional finance companies that we have been talking to, they think of us as like a diversity kind of company. Whereas when we talk about blockchain companies, they see us as a potential place to tap into our audience, both as customers and as potential employees. So it's my assessment, looking at, from an outsider's perspective. I'm seeing our audience is interested in blockchain and DeFi and all these new areas of digital assets in general. So our audience is interested in it. They're also, for the first time, I've been also extremely interested in AI. I have studied, done so much research on AI. I taught myself Python, not necessarily to become a developer, but to just understand enough as I'm hiring developers. And we have been talking about AI on the platform for a very long time. We've been talking about biotech, everything else, but nothing has had the impact of blockchain for some reason. And I think that reason has a lot to do with NFTs, because of how NFTs are intertwined with art and culture, and it speaks to women. So I think something is happening here that it's just slipping away from financial traditional finance companies, and I think there's a small window of opportunity to become part of that movement. And for various reasons, regulations being one of them, and the fact that obviously traditional finance companies are embedded within the regulatory frameworks in a way that they can't innovate the way that new companies. So in the new startup kind of space, it's like, just go ahead and do it until they tell you not to, right? Whereas in the other, from your kind of side of things, it would be more like, oh, let's make sure that there is no regulation issues, that there's everything's going to be okay. So I wanted to see whether you have experience, whether you have observed anything like that, and whether you were aware of this.
Yeah, very aware. I mean, I think it's quite a broad topic, right? So blockchain as a concept covers a wide range of possible use cases, and we are, like all the other banks, the traditional banks as you describe us, are actively engaged in blockchain opportunities to streamline, simplify, and to create better solutions and products for customers. So I think a one sort of brush approach around blockchain probably is not necessarily appropriate. I think where it gets a little harder for banks is this regulated space, and whether we like it or not, there are, as you can see from the history of banking over, certainly since the financial crisis in 2008, there's significant examples of where banks have got it wrong, and the regulation focus has shifted significantly into arguably much more regulation than 2008. Well, not arguably, there has been a lot more regulation in 2008, a lot more personal and corporate accountability expectations on individuals like myself to ensure that we are doing the right thing for customers. That does change your risk appetite. I mean, candidly, that brings it to life. And my personal view is there's probably a little bit too much regulation now, but it's understandable why we are where we are. That does candidly impact some areas, but if I look at some of the, you mentioned crypto, I think crypto is an interesting opportunity. I think the central banks are looking at it because they obviously see it as an opportunity. They also see it as a potential risk to financial stability. The banks are at the forefront of maintaining financial stability in the market, and we're the sort of tip of the spear, if you like, to make sure that we are able to do that for the economy. So it's a difficult challenge to find the right balance. But I don't think it's fair to say it's a black or white answer, a yes or no answer. I think it's much more complex than that. You look at what we're doing, we're spending significant amount of money in things like machine learning and AI, using the data that we have to better inform for our customers, whether they're female or male or regardless of background, to bring insights into what they're doing. We're also doing a lot around behavioral science, using behavioral science techniques to assess how we can be more impactful for customers and help them when they really need it. And when we're looking at things like female entrepreneurs, for example, getting involved with those entrepreneurs at the right time based on some of the data that we're using and using some of the new techniques. So, if you ask me candidly, would I love to have the flexibility to operate like a fintech? I absolutely would. I mean, I'd love to have the flexibility that you have to do that. And we've done some of that with our ventures. We have Metal, which is our sort of small, medium enterprise startup entity that operates, at pace like a startup. But we also have to operate in an environment that is very regulated, can be challenging, and the repercussions of getting it wrong are quite impactful. We've seen, significant increase in fraud linked to crypto. Now, to be fair, I don't think it's fair to blame crypto. I don't think crypto is the issue. It's the underlying opportunity it creates for fraudsters to get involved. So our first priority has to be to protect our customers. That's our number one priority. Trust is really important in the financial sector. So it's really difficult to find that right balance to give customers as much access and support as we can into these new innovative industries, whilst not opening the door too wide, which allows some very sophisticated and capable fraudsters who are doing this from a laptop. No one goes into a branch these days and says, give me the money. They sit in a room and they do it on a laptop, and it's super sophisticated. We're seeing really, really sophisticated fraud impacting our customers. So it's trying to find that right balance. But I absolutely agree with you. I think the interest levels are huge. And I think the financial services sector, particularly the big banks, need to find a way to satisfy that and to support customers, our female customers and all our customers, but female customers in satisfying that desire and appetite to get involved in those things, whilst recognizing the regulatory environment. I think one of the biggest challenges, something I see actually at the moment, is it's actually fairly unregulated. There isn't really regulation against this space. It's so new and developing at such pace that the regulators are trying to catch up to that. Banks are sort of stuck in the middle of that a little, which is strong demand from customers and entrepreneurs to be involved, versus knowing that there will be a regulatory catch up that will impact. So it's finding that balance. And sometimes we don't get it 100% right. I'd like to think we get it more right than wrong. But I agree with you. I think there's a massive opportunity here, and it's about harnessing it in the right way.
Definitely. I actually see a silver lining in this for traditional financial companies to be able to cater to women in a way that it satisfies women's appetite for risk, which is generally lower than men. Like generally speaking, women are a lot more risk averse, at least historically it's been like that. Our research shows that's the case. We hear it from our audiences. That's why they haven't gone into crypto yet. That's why they are most of the time they're just, it's so refreshing for them that they can come in and they can listen to me, and it's like, and I can explain to them, this is what I'm doing. You need to be very careful. One of the things about crypto, NFTs, all that digital asset space, Web3 in general, blockchain space, one of the things that's really unique about it is that, yes, it will put all the power in your own hand, but also it puts all the responsibility in your own hand. So I need to constantly explain to them, it's like, this is not like a bank. If you give your key to someone, and they take all your money, it's not like you can go to the bank and say, I was defrauded, and you can somehow get your money back. There is no police to go to. This is like, you've got, that seed phrase you have, that whatever the key that you have, that is like, it's up to you how to protect that. And when I talk to them like that, they're like, oh my God, this is so scary. So that's why I think that there is an opportunity for banks, to introduce platforms like us, to and collaborate with us to make these new forms of digital assets more accessible, but in a way that it also gives them a level of peace of mind that we are still here for you, and that we are gonna help you, protect that. So I think there's a middle ground opportunity, but the window of opportunity very small, because very, very soon, and as you mentioned, there is a bit too much regulation, and one of the well, too much regulations that's not relevant to this new space, you see, and then there's not enough regulations for this new space. So Elon Musk says something really cool that I heard in an interview which I thought, was so true. He was saying that, why is it that we have a procedure for creating new regulations, but we don't have a procedure for getting rid of those when they no longer apply? Like they are, the world is moving so fast. We just submitted a proposal to a company, a blockchain company that wants to work with us. And I said to them, look, I recommend, rather than trying to do this in 6 months, we do it in 3 months, because this space is moving so fast. Who knows where we'll be in 6 months' time? There could be a whole new world. Like, just the last quarter of 2021, we have had 2 big things that happened. One was the NFT space blew up. And the second one was metaverse thing, the whole an announcement from Facebook wanting to become Meta, and like it's just gone absolutely nuts. And I think that the entire 2022 is mostly going to be focused around metaverse and NFTs, and that's a whole other topic that we could talk about forever, because how can you adapt to that metaverse virtual environment? And here's the thing: you are going to need digital assets if you need to live mostly in a digital environment, in a virtual environment, right? So I think that traditional finance companies have a big challenge on their hand. So it's important for them to collaborate with startups. It's important for them to integrate with the new scene, to stay relevant, right? And I think women have a big role to play in that.
No, I completely agree. If we look at our entrepreneur hubs, we're seeing innovation at pace. I mean, the rate of change is huge, and we stay as close as we can to that by working with startups, helping them through our enterprise labs and working with them on helping them to get going, and frankly, listening to what they're doing and learning from what they're up to. So it's very much a two-way arrangement. I completely agree with you that the rate of change is accelerating, and it's beholden on large companies like ourselves to make sure we don't fall behind. And I think, as I said earlier, I think sometimes we get that really right. I think we really get close to customers and we help them. And other times we aren't. We don't get it 100% right. I think often because of a fear of regulatory challenge that sits in the background. But when it comes to sort of helping, our female entrepreneurs to be successful, I think that open door and listening, understanding what they need and where they want to go, and trying to bring as much insight as we can, and working, with others like yourselves to bring that insight to bear in a way in which they can access it in real time on their timeline, not our timeline. When they want to gain access to that data, I think is really important. If we look at our competitors, I often get asked who I think our main competitors are, and the obvious answer is the other banks, and they absolutely are big competitors of ours. But actually, it is the Metas, the Googles, the Amazons of this world, and the Apples of this world that are now competing in the financial services space, and they are consuming startup opportunities at pace, right? And we have to find a way to compete to that, to stay relevant.
Okay, yes, yeah, no, definitely. So, especially as we go into this new era where, like, let's say potentially, like, if you have an NFT that is worth, hundreds of thousands of pounds or dollars, then you could then use that as a collateral to get a loan. I can see that in the future you could get a mortgage against your NFT, right? So there are all of these new opportunities that are happening. So one thing that I recently came to my mind, which I think it's an observation that I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily feel it the way that I did, because I originally come from Iran. And I remember, I grew up in Iran. I left Iran when I was 23. And I remember when I was 21, for the first time I left Iran, to go on holiday, I used to work at the Netherlands embassy in Tehran. And because of that, I was able to get a visa, because generally speaking, it's very hard to get a visa if you have an Iranian passport. But at that time, I was working for the Dutch embassy, and I was able to get a Schengen visa. So I went with my boyfriend at the time to the Netherlands and to Germany. And we went to a heavy metal concert. So I don't know if you know, but I used to be in a death metal band, actually.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's one part of kind of my colorful background. So we went to the first country essentially that I set foot in outside of Iran was Germany, and we arrived in Munich, and I was absolutely shocked. I knew that I would have to pay for everything, in their money, right? And I can't remember whether by then it was already euro. I think it was already euro. So I was like, oh my God, like everything was so expensive for me, because, even though when I was in Iran, I was earning dollars, but because I was earning dollars because I worked for the embassy, but I was obviously spending in real. So just like, it was incredible, like this money that we had brought together, for this for the holiday. I was like, what? Like, I'm paying this much money for like a small bar of chocolate. With that money, like, you can buy a week's worth of food for like a family in Iran. So it was an absolute shock. And then obviously later on I moved to the UK, and now I earn pounds, and I'm a British citizen, and everything is forgotten. Then recently I had a moment when I had the exact same moment, and that memory completely replayed for me. And that was when I went to OpenSea, which is OpenSea is the NFT marketplace, which is similar to eBay, right? Like, and they've just been valued at a quarter of eBay, like more than a quarter of eBay, right? And this is like within a year or so that the valuation has gone from like 1.5 billion to 13 billion. They just raised money on a 13 billion valuation. So just within the last year, they have completely just gone, it's the biggest NFT marketplace. So I went to this marketplace, and I was like just doing a practice run, buying stuff, just figure out how NFTs work, how to buy one. And oh my God, so it's like, for the first time, I was like, okay, I'm paying in ETH, right? I'm paying in Ethereum. So, and each ETH is like $4,000, right? For like, and I'm suddenly thinking, okay, like this is like 0.1 ETH, or like, 0. So and so. And then I kept calculating in my head, what is that in dollars? And I realized at that point that that's exactly what's happening. Like, it's exactly similar kind of thing to, what happened to me when I came from Iran, and went to Germany, and a similar thing. This is like, it's another nation state, these, and it's a nation state where it's a different currency, it's a different value system, and all of a sudden you're paying, the equivalent of $2,000 for the picture of a kitty butt, which is what I bought. And I was like, okay, this is like uncharted territory. It's like a whole other world. So I think, people talk a lot about blockchain being bringing the possibility of equality, and, but actually I think it's creating a whole new kind of inequality. There's going to be a whole other kind of inequality, because it's only people who have been able to buy, these tokens, these coins at early stages, or that are billionaires that are buying it now, that are able to go in and do these purchases at the prices. And then of course, when you're exiting, then you have to pay something called a gas fee, which is like, it's another, like a big percentage of what you're paying. So I wondered whether you had any thoughts on that, and whether you will see, like, where do you see this going? And
where do I see this going? I think your use of the language uncharted territory is a good description. I think, probably a good way of looking at it is the central banks are looking at this very closely now, because it, as you say, creates a whole new ecosystem of value that is unregulated and isn't backed by any fiat currency. So therefore, the valuations of this value is, or the units, if you like, is very, very hard to anchor back to something tangible, which obviously makes central banks nervous, because obviously it can create financial instability. If it continues to scale, then what does that do to the financial stability of home markets? And that's their mandate. Their mandate is to create financial stability. So, but at the same time, it's a great opportunity as well, right? It's frictionless. It doesn't have the same challenges that cross-border payments potentially have had in the past, although that is also shifting materially into a real-time, frictionless cross-border capability as well. So, we're seeing a real different change in how payments are moved around the world now versus 25 years ago, it could take 3 weeks for a payment to move from A to B. Now, in theory, you can do it in real time, pretty much in most locations. So it's a huge opportunity, but also a huge risk. So I think it will continue to develop at pace. I think we'll see my personal view is, I think we'll see some winners and some losers, as you would expect. I think over time, there will be more regulation of this. I think there has to be, whether users want it or not. I think it is unrealistic to think that it can remain unregulated, because of that security concern and the danger of certainly less sophisticated investors understanding the risk that they're taking and then ending up losing money. To your point, if there's an issue that relates to a fiat currency, you go to your bank, you have a conversation with your bank, and your bank is there to protect you. That's our one of our primary duties is to protect our customers when they receive and make payments. In blockchain, in Ethereum, you've got none of that. You've got no one sitting there behind it supporting it. And that obviously is a concern. All the time things are going great, everyone's happy, valuations are going up. When it goes the other way, or there's some kind of issue, and we do see them from time to time, there are examples of issues, then obviously you've got some very exposed people who have nowhere to go, and that clearly is a concern. So it's really fast paced. I think if you ask me the same question in a year's time, you might have a slightly different perspective depending on how quickly it progresses. But the fact that the central banks are so interested in this, they've set up working groups with all the players, by the way, it's not just the banks, all the players that are involved are part of these sandbox exercises to find a way to get the benefits of this without creating unnecessary risk, particularly when the theory of blockchain is it should be relatively safe in terms of how people control it, but you've got to fully understand what you're getting into, and lots of people I don't think they do.
Yeah, you pointed out something very important. You were like, about the less sophisticated investors. So I have a little bit of a problem with that term, because when we say to people you're not sophisticated enough to make these decisions to, let's say, invest in startups, for example, that closes the opportunity for them to get those high returns. What crypto does is that it allows you to take a small part of that action, even if it's as small as £100 or $1,000 or whatever. Yeah. So one of the things that is very positive about this new industry for me is, I feel like, and that's what I love about women getting into it, because it puts the opportunity and the responsibility in your own lap, and then it's like you need to educate yourself. So it's no longer, when you are relying on the bank, you're putting your money there and you don't know what's happening to it, and you don't care, it's like, okay, it's taken care of. Whereas with this, you have to step up and you have to learn about it. And I think for women in particular, it's a very positive thing, because it tells them that you are good with money, you are good with, you have to be good with money, like you have to make decisions for yourself. So it's no longer that you can just rely on your husband and your brother or whatever, right? You need to actually learn about these things. So that's a positive thing. Now, not everybody has the inclination and time to spend to do that, so I do think that we do need some kind of a middle ground for people who don't necessarily want to do that. But whether that middle ground will happen, I have my doubts, because I feel like we're going towards a society which is like, it's the top 10% who are skilled, and then there's the bottom 90% who are going to be left behind, because it's getting so complicated. Like every day it's getting so much. When I'm looking at even something like NFTs or crypto, it's like every day there's so much to learn. And I spend so much time learning about these things. And I think for a lot of people, it's like almost unreasonably hard. So I wonder what will happen. I think there's room for innovation. One of the things, I call myself a tech philosopher and a transition architect, like somebody who's like trying to help people get a level of understanding of this transition and see what to do. So I think the biggest opportunity lies in the middle, where you can make it accessible for them. And that's where I think the biggest opportunity lies for, again, traditional banks that are able to, because they still have the customer base, like for example, I still have an account with Lloyd's, but I don't use it. I can't remember the last time I touched my Lloyd's card. No money goes into it, no money comes out, and I have 2 credit cards with them that is never touched. Same with my Barclays. I don't, like, the only time I used my Barclays was like to put money in Binance, to buy crypto, right? So I don't use any of these. It's the only banks that I'm able to use at the moment are something like maybe Starling, because it allows me to do some of my day-to-day work related stuff. But otherwise, there is just very, very limit. Like all the banks, they have very similar offering, and there's absolutely an opportunity for them to look at this middle ground and say, look, let me see, how can I make your life easier? How can I make you, enable you to interact with this new world and make it, in a way that is easier. Then going back to regulation as a last remark, one of the points about regulations, I don't know if you watched the 5-hour crypto hearing so I watched the full 5-hour. So one of the things when you watch something like that, and it was a similar kind of scenario where there was a 5-hour hearing of Zuckerberg and Bezos and Tim Cook, etc. So one of the things that comes to my mind when I watch these things is that the regulators don't know enough about the industry. Like, if they're not native to it, they're not digital natives, right? They don't know enough. Like, they've never gone and created a MetaMask account. They've never gone on and bought an NFT on OpenSea. So how can you regulate something that you haven't used? Yeah,
I think that's partly fair. I do think, to be fair to the regulators, they are massively engaged in this topic. So everyone's learning. So I think they are reaching into banks. They're reaching into other players, non-banks, who are actually actively in there. They're listening and learning and trying to find the right middle ground to allow that flexibility for people to be involved in this, without creating the wrong environment where, if you fast forward, there could be some challenges in the future. And that's important, right? So making sure that we're protecting people whilst we're giving them the most opportunity. When I use the word non-sophisticated, it's probably bad use of language. What I meant was really those that are professional investors who are investing, significant sums in this as part of their portfolio, versus others who see a really big opportunity, but are not 100% sure, what that opportunity is and what the risks are. I think that group of investors or people who want to take part, we need to find ways to help them as much as possible to get the access, but done in the right way so they fully understand the risks
Yeah.
they're taking, and and we have to be very alive to that. And as I say, we have seen, unfortunately, we have seen very sophisticated fraudsters take advantage of people in their desire to try and be part of this. Now, that again, that's less, to be fair, that's less of a comment around the underlying asset, the crypto. It's more around the fraudsters using it as a new opportunity. As banks in particular have worked really hard to try and close as many doors as we can to fraudsters, they obviously look for the next opportunity. And this is a space that is creating some more opportunity for fraudsters. So, but I completely agree with you. I think that the pace of change is so fast and getting faster that it's beholden on the more traditional players in the market, like banks like us, to catch up and keep up and make sure we're being part of the conversation. I'll refer back to the earlier points I made around sometimes we are unable to do that because of the regulatory environment in which we're operating. But actually, if you think about what happened in the financial crisis, which seems a long, long time ago now, it's 2008, the rate of change of regulation was to ensure that couldn't happen again. And that's a good thing. That's absolutely a good thing. It's finding that healthy balance between innovation and regulation.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very good conversation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Matt. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Matt Tuck from NatWest. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider subscribing on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or any other one of your favorite podcast channels. And don't forget to give it a 5-star rating and write a review. Our team works extremely hard to bring these interviews to you, and your support will help more people discover the content. Finally, if you're not yet a member of FemPeak, head over to fempeak.ai, register, and join a community that actively supports women's professional growth.